Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here to do the mom-inspired book tag. This tag was originally created by Annie from Blissful and Bookish, and she was also the one who tagged me, and she created this tag as a way to celebrate moms and caregivers and just like spread some love about them and their qualities and connect those to books. And you definitely don't have to be a mom or a caregiver to participate. I'm not. I'm still excited to do this tag. Of course, Mother's Day has already happened, but I did want to get this book tag up before the end of May at least, so let's get into the questions. Number 1, best friend. We do everything with our moms and we can always count on them. Pick characters in a book whose friendship you admire the most. I'm gonna go with one. It's a series I just continued with recently, and that is Wind Witch by Susan Dennard. This is the second book in the Witchland series, and I'm of course talking about Safi and Iseult. Their dynamic and their friendship and their really deep bond is absolutely one of my favorite things about this series. It was really strong in Truth Witch. I know a lot of people were disappointed in Wind Witch because the two of them were actually separated in this book, and I definitely understand that, but I think the reason it didn't bother me as much is because 1, I was prepared for it. I had heard about that from other people, and 2, like, you still feel this really deep bond they have, and I liked that, like, okay, so I hope they reunite soon, but I kind of like that in this book we see them separate from each other, and the way that they still care about each other and think about each other even when they are separated, and the way that they draw inspiration from what the other person would do. Like, I think all of those things are also very important in friendships, so I liked seeing those. Like when Iseult was in a dangerous situation, she would think about how brave Safi would be. Like, she would just rush into danger in order to protect somebody, even though Iseult is definitely a very look before you leap kind of person. And then with Safi, like, she took inspiration from the fact that she knew that Iseult would be that person who like waits and watches and waits for the perfect moment to make their move. And I just like really love the way that they like draw on each other's strength like that, even when they're not physically together. So that's my pick. Number 2 is comfort. Moms are always there when we're sick or sad. What's a book that always puts you in a better mood? And I have to go with anything by Jane Austen. This is Persuasion, which is actually, I think, tied for my favorite book of hers. We haven't gotten to this one yet for Austen Anonymous, which is why it's not all tabbed up. But I have talked about many times on this channel how Jane Austen is a very comforting experience for me because I have so many memories about growing up loving her books and the movies based on her books with my mom and my sister. Like, that was always something that was very important to all of us together, and I really love that. And in addition to that, I do find something very comforting about her books because the problems they deal with are serious but surmountable, I think. They're about very ordinary people and the kind of ordinary hardships that they're going through. Like, I remember learning that during World War I, the books that soldiers would ask for the most when they were recovering in the hospital, they would ask for Jane Austen and for Shakespeare plays. And I think that is so interesting, and it makes so much sense to me because I feel like those two writers would help with comfort in very, very different ways. With Shakespeare, I feel like that raw emotion is there. I imagine that that would be almost cathartic to read about that rage and that passion and that fear and things like that while you're recovering from something as terrible as war. And with Jane Austen, I feel like it would be comforting because the problems are small but not unimportant, if that makes sense. Like, these women are facing things that will affect their happiness for the rest of their lives, so it's not a little or insignificant thing. But just to see those very ordinary human problems that are not related to war, I imagine that would have been very comforting for them. Sorry, that was kind of a tangent, but I just find that a super interesting fact. So Jane Austen is definitely a comforting read for me for many reasons, probably because of my memories and nostalgia associated with it, but also because she's such a talented writer at writing characters and situations with warmth and depth and that feel very relatable, and that relatability is comforting even when they deal with some very serious things. Number 3 is Doesn't Give Up. Moms endure and never give up on us. What's a book you were tempted to DNF but didn't give up on and finished? I've mentioned several times that I don't DNF books very often, but one that I was very, very seriously tempted to was Wanted by Betsy Shao. That is the second book in the Spellmakers series. I don't remember if that's the name of the series, but I think it's something like that. Storymakers, I think that's what it is. And I really enjoyed the first book. It's kind of a like Wizard of Oz inspired story a little bit, but there's a lot of other fairy tales and stories thrown in. And then the second book was just like, it kind of went off the rails. Like the first half, I would say, almost a half, I was really not enjoying it. I was so confused. Like, it had been a while since I read the first book, but even considering that, I just had no idea what was going on. We were just thrown into this completely different like story. We were following a different character who was connected to our main character in the first book, but like, they were referring to things and characters that I didn't even remember from the first book that I wasn't sure actually happened, and just the story itself was so choppy and disjointed, and there were just a lot of things where I'm like, I don't even feel like I'm reading this book. Like, I'm not retaining anything that I'm reading from this book because like it's referring to things that I don't think we learned about, or the ones that I think we did hear about in the first book I don't remember. So I was like, if it doesn't get better in the next like I think I gave it like 20 or 30 pages maybe. I was like, I'm quitting. I'm not going to finish this series because it doesn't feel like I'm getting anything out of it. And then like about the halfway point, things really started turning around. The plot started making sense. We started getting connections to things that had happened before. And even though it's still not my favorite book in the series, I'm really glad I finished it because for one thing, the ending I think was really fantastic. I can see why a lot of people would hate it. I loved it. And also I ended up really enjoying the last book in the trilogy. So I'm glad that I didn't give up on that series. That's one that like I would hesitate to recommend to people because that series is very weird. There's a lot of things about it that I shouldn't like as much as I do, but I just enjoyed anyway. Number 4 is Selfless. Moms always sacrifice and put others before themselves. What's a book you had to sacrifice for? And Annie mentioned like, you know, sacrifice money for or sacrifice time for, like anything, sacrifice anything. I'm going to go with an answer which is one that I had to sacrifice shelf space for, and that is my Artemis Fowl series because I have 2 complete sets of an 8-book series. Like this is I just grabbed the first 4 of each set. So these are the first 4 books and these are my original copies and they're like very beat up. I have like read these over and over and over. So I've definitely gotten my use out of them. I don't really want to read them anymore because they're kind of starting to fall apart. So I ended up ordering, I don't even know what edition this is, but like the newer ones. These have all my tabs from our Artemis Fowl read along. So these are the first 4 books of that series. And there are very, very few books or series that I will buy multiple editions of. Like I have no problem obviously with people who do that. But it's just not something I feel the need to do because again, I have very limited shelf space and I feel like once I love a book, like that's my copy of it, you know? But there are exceptions for a very, very few series and Artemis Fowl is one of them because it is so important to me. And also like I'm kind of considering getting the brand new editions that are like the really brightly colored ones because I really like the art for those, and initially I really didn't like those, but they're really growing on me. And I don't know, I don't mind having like they're for different purposes, you know, because my original copies I'm not reading anymore. These are the ones that I would read when I went to look at my tabs and my notes. So maybe this 3rd set, if I get it, would be the ones that I just want to read when I don't want my previous thoughts in the book, like my tabs and everything. So I don't know, that's kind of how I'm justifying it. But really it's just because it is one of the most important series to me in the world, and I feel like having multiple copies of that one is significant in a way that it wouldn't be for other books, if that makes sense. Number 5 is Love. Moms are pure love. They always make us feel special and important no matter what. What's your favorite love story? It doesn't have to be a romance novel. And I picked a book that I think really beautifully shows love in a lot of different forms. And that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. I have a whole review for this book. I've talked about it a lot. This was my favorite book of last year, so you guys might be sick of hearing about it. But even though the premise of this story is kind of, the setup is about romantic love because the frame element of the story is that Aphrodite gets caught by Hephaestus having an affair with Ares, the god of war. And Aphrodite sort of gets put on an informal trial almost, and so to defend herself and to defend the importance of love and of what she does, she tells 2 intertwining love stories from World War I. And that's kind of like the rest of the book is those stories, and we kind of get little snippets of the gods reacting and everything, and it's just a beautifully constructed book. And even though like romantic love is very important in this book, and you know, Aphrodite being the goddess of passion and romantic love and beauty and all of that, like that makes sense, but there is also so many other kinds of love in this book. Love between friends, love for country, love for doing the right thing, love for humanity as a whole, familial love. Like there is a lot about the importance of love, and I think one of the reasons this book means so much to me is because at its core, this is a book that defends emotions and love as being important. Like intangible things matter, like selflessness and courage and love and friendship. Like all of those things are very, very important, and it doesn't make you weak to care about things or about people, and that's something I just believe very, very strongly, and I think it was beautifully explored in this book. Number 6 is Homemaker. Moms make sure that we are comfortable at home. If you could live with a fictional family for a day, whose home would you go to? And I have to go with the Logroños from the Love Sugar Magic series by Ana Mariano. I just love this family so much. I love Leo and her sisters. I love her parents. I love her extended family. Just her whole like family network I really, really love. I would love to spend time with them and to hang out with Leo and her sisters. I would love to like go to their bakery and just like hang out and talk and just like spend time with their family. Like I just love the way that they're so vibrant and they're so like loving and caring for each other. And like I say every time I talk about them, they definitely fight. Like they have differences, but they're always there for each other when it counts. And I would just love to hang out with them for a day. Number 7 is Forgiving. Despite our mistakes and shortcomings, moms are always ready to forgive. Name a character you hate but would eventually forgive. And this was actually the hardest question in the whole tag for me. And I think that's because like generally if I hate a character, it's for a reason that I don't know if I'd be able to forgive, or I would find it very, very hard to forgive, and like I can't even really picture when that would happen, or if it's a character that I could see myself forgiving or like kind of coming around and understanding their point of view. Generally, if that's the case, I wouldn't describe them as a character I hate necessarily. So I had a really hard time with this. With what I'm going to go with is Megan from Call It What You Want by Bridget Kemmerer. I don't know if you guys remember the wrap up I did when I talked about this book. I think it was December of last year. I like went off on a whole like several minute rant about Megan and her bad choices because it's something that like I personally find very offensive, like this particular kind of selfishness, because Megan cheats during the SAT and every single student in the room gets their scores thrown out. And Megan even admits that there was no real reason that she did it. Like, she could have passed by herself, and like you kind of get some backstory for why it happened. Like she was feeling like pressure to live up to her sister and all of this, and like I get that, but I don't feel like we got any information that would justify why she would feel the need to do this. And especially like the selfishness really gets me because there are people taking that test in that room who probably don't have another chance to do it. Like for financial reasons or scheduling, or just like there's so many reasons why somebody would be depending on that time to take a test. And the fact that Megan just threw that all away for her own selfish needs that she admits she didn't even need to do just like infuriates me. So even though I would say I hate Megan, or at least like hate her choices and that aspect of her, and the fact that she never seems to understand that what she did was wrong, I could potentially see myself forgiving her in the future. Like, she didn't kill anyone, you know, like I read a lot of fantasy and stuff, so it's like some of the villain characters, it's like you killed a ton of people, so that would be, I think, harder to forgive. So by comparison, Megan is not that bad. Like, it's just like she does things that I just personally have a hard time looking past, but in a more like ordinary context. So theoretically, I could see myself maybe forgiving Megan if she like really, really felt bad and actually recognized that what she did was wrong and apologized and tried to make amends somehow. Like, the book kind of hints that that might happen at some point, although I don't feel like it was done in a satisfactory way, but it's possible, I guess. Number 8, teacher. Moms are our first teachers. They continue to guide and mentor us throughout our lives. Name a book that has taught you things that will stay with you forever. And for that one, I'm going with I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai with Christina Lamb. This is a nonfiction book that I know a lot of people have heard of, and I had really only known like the barest details of Malala's story before I read this book. Like, I knew that she was important for the fight for girls' education, and I knew that she had been shot by the Taliban and survived, and that she has continued working towards women's issues and especially the right of women to have an education and things like that. So I knew she was amazing, and I knew like the bare details of what had happened to her, but I didn't really know much about her life or like anything really about the context for what she was doing. And I feel like I really did learn that after this book. And especially one of the things I think is important is the way this book talks about the United States involvement in what was happening in the Middle East, and specifically in this book with Pakistan. And just like the way that you learn about it in schools, or at least in my school, it kind of sugarcoats, I think, our involvement in that, in America's history of ending up on the side of dictators for like superficial reasons like oil and things like that. And I think the way this book just was very upfront about that, like it didn't sugarcoat, and this book didn't like set out to accuse people in particular or anything, but just by telling the truth in an unvarnished way, I think it was really important. And of course, like the fact that history is affected by who's telling it and like the way that you're learning it and where you're learning it, that's something I've always known, but I think that was a really important reminder in this book. And I learned so much about Malala and about her activism and some of the history of Pakistan that I don't think we talk about enough in schools, or at least in my school. So this was just really amazing, and I really do feel like the things I learned from this are going to stick with me. Number 9 is dedication, and you can add a personal message if you like. What's a book that you would like to dedicate to your mom and why? And I'm going to go with The Clergyman's Wife by Molly Greeley. This is a Pride and Prejudice inspired story. It kind of talks about what happens to Charlotte Lucas after the events of Pride and Prejudice, and kind of imagines what her life would have been like, how she would have felt about her choices. And for one thing, this is a book I loved. It's, I think, one of the strongest Jane Austen inspired books I have ever read, and I'm starting to read quite a few at this point. And I think this was just really beautiful, and so I wanted to pick something related to Jane Austen because obviously my mom got me into Jane Austen, and that's something very important between us. But also I think it's cool to pick this book because we've always kind of disagreed on Charlotte's character. Like, my mom has always been very sympathetic and understood why she did what she did, while I had a hard time seeing from her perspective. Like, intellectually I knew why she did what she did, but I could not make myself understand it. Because it was just so different from, I think, how I would have reacted. And I just think that's very indicative of one of the things that I love about my mom. She helps me see different perspectives. I go to her for advice about things and things that I have a hard time seeing clearly or seeing from a particular point of view. I love the way that my mom can give me perspective, and I also feel like she's such a sympathetic and compassionate person. Those are just some of the many things I love about my mom, and those things I think are really well represented in this book. And finally, number 10 is to tag other booktubers to honor their moms. I tag everybody who wants to do this to honor their moms or like a mother figure in your life, but I did write down a couple people I specifically am going to tag if you would like to do this, and those are Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly, who she does have kids, and Julia from Shakespeare and Such, who does not have children, but she's a preschool teacher, and she just always has like very strong mom energy. I feel like she's always talking about it, and just like her whole like vibe and everything and books that she loves are very like mom inspired, I think. So I'm going to tag those two people, but like I said, you don't have to be a mom or like doing something related to children in order to do this tag and honor your mom or mother figure, so everybody feel free to do this. I feel like this was a very long tag video and I kind of rambled, so I'm sorry about that, but thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!